There is no God. There was never one to begin with. Honestly, we've known this at least since the birth of sociology. And if that upsets you, good. That means we're finally getting honest. The idea of God is not some neutral, timeless proposition. It's a product of human imagination, with roots traceable to specific cultures, needs, and gaps in knowledge. To entertain the God concept as if it emerged from pure logic or dispassionate inquiry is to erase the very conditions that gave birth to it. An abstract God stripped of myth, story, ritual, and commandment is no longer the same idea. It's a rhetorical decoy. We don't take the possibility of Zeus seriously once we understand his mythological origins. So why treat the modern God of the gaps with any more reverence just because he wears philosophical perfume? I think it's time that we revisit the need to define God argument. Many skeptics fall into the trap of entertaining increasingly vague definitions of God as though the conversation must remain open-ended out of intellectual fairness. But I challenge the very legitimacy of this premise. The God concept is not untethered from human history. The idea of God doesn't exist in a vacuum. This is not just rhetorical, it's empirically demonstrable. Every known God concept has traceable sociocultural origins. The God idea emerges in response to survival needs, ignorance, social control, or cosmological awe. These ideas evolved with language, hierarchy, morality, and early science. God is not an original truth. It's a cultural adaptation, a byproduct of human speculation in pre-scientific context. So when someone presents an abstract God without cultural baggage, without intervention, without testable traits, they are not defending the concept as it actually evolved, but rather an intellectual reconstruction retrofitted for apologetic survival. Anytime the abstract God is mentioned, I immediately think of either a straw man or a red herring. Entertaining the idea that a coherent philosophical God exists when most people functionally believe in a socially meaningful God, personal, moral, interventionist, is a distraction. A philosophical God who does not intervene, interact, or otherwise introduce itself into the activities or affairs of humans should be definitively discarded from the conversation as long as it continues to mind its own business. I don't find reason to discuss the possibility of something that has no utility. Yeah, it may exist, but you'll never know, you'll never see it, you don't really need it, it doesn't really need you. At this point of abstraction, we could effectively be talking about anything or nothing at all. To me, that is a clear straw man. But let's look at the red herring aspect. When you look at what this claim is and call it out objectively, it's diverting from the collapse of traditional God claims by fleeing into vagueness. Well, maybe there's just something out there. This shift to an abstract God is not a continuation of the original claim. It's an evasion strategy, a rhetorical sleight of hand to avoid conceding that religious gods have failed. A thought experiment is not a revelation, and the plural of anecdote is not data. When defenders of God reduce the concept to mere possibility, we leave the realm of religion, community, morality, and lived experience and enter a world of unfalsifiable speculation, semantic gymnastics, and metaphysical wish-casting. At some point, we must hold the line and say, this isn't a serious academic pursuit anymore. It's a game of God-shaped shadows. Just as you wouldn't endlessly debate the existence of unicorns after showing they are mythological artifacts, we shouldn't indefinitely indulge the God concept when its origins are clearly anthropogenic. This is why I stand firm when I say there is no God. The claim doesn't exist in a vacuum. The historical assertion that God exists is never neutral or context-free. It always comes packaged in cultural baggage, historical narratives, moral frameworks, and authoritative claims over how people should live. When someone says God, they're not just making a metaphysical claim, they're often invoking a specific tradition with specific consequences and interventionist expectations. 100% of interventionist God claims are historically anchored and debunkable. Every known God in human history has been tied to origin stories, miraculous events, chosen people, or divine interventions, all of which fall apart under historical, scientific, or logical scrutiny. For example, Yahweh's authorship of the Torah, Allah's dictation of the Quran, or Jesus' bodily resurrection all are historical claims that can be and have been critically examined and reasonably dismissed. Once those claims fall, the God tied to them collapses as well. Now, when dealing with undefined gods, these are empty containers. When apologists retreat to vague language, a higher power, something out there, the ground of all being, the thing that connects us all, they abandon definition altogether, often creating these really interesting false dichotomies. Again, the thing that connects us all together. There are multiple things that connect us all. Life connects us all. Being in the same universe connects us all. Being on the same planet connects us all. You see the problem here. There's also a logical problem. A God with no attributes can't be evaluated. You can't disprove a claim that makes no claim. Existence claims require sufficient definition in order to be meaningful. A God that's nothing but a placeholder for mystery isn't functionally different from saying, we don't know. It's like arguing over a locked box that no one has ever opened, touched, or described, only that it must be meaningful. If there are no clear attributes, then there is nothing to affirm or deny. Undefined gods are removed from serious consideration because they can't be considered seriously. And most importantly, undefined gods by nature are not interventionist. They have no worshipers, no warriors, or no warlords to worry the rest of us with their need to intervene. So what God are we talking about? When people say you can't say there is no God, ask a God in what sense? A specific religious God? That's debunked history. A vague force? That's undefined and irrelevant. A possible future discovery? That's a scientific question, not a theological one. Bottom line, the word God has lost all coherent meaning. Until it's defined in testable terms, it's not a useful or defendable claim. I don't say there is no God lightly or for shock value. I say it because it's the most honest, most defensible position when we step back and examine the actual roots of the idea, not just the claim, but the entire scaffolding that keeps it standing in human society. See, the claim that a God exists doesn't exist in a vacuum. It never has. It's always tethered to specific historical, cultural, and political context. And in 100% of the cases where God has been defined, described, and worshiped, that God is attached to stories, claims about creation, intervention, morality, law, and revelation. These are not abstract philosophical musings. They are concrete claims about the nature of reality, many of which are easily debunked or exposed as myth once we apply history, anthropology, or basic critical thinking. Once those claims fall, the God falls with them, because the claim doesn't stand on its own. It's not just there is a God. It's there is this God who did these things and therefore deserves this kind of obedience, faith, or worship. And once the actions and attributes don't hold up, the figures lose all legitimacy. Now, some people, perhaps recognizing this collapse, try to move the goalpost. They say, well, sure, the gods of religion might be wrong, but maybe there's still something, a higher power, a force, an intelligence, something greater. The problem with that maybe is that it comes from want, not reason. We didn't have a reason to say, well, maybe there is something there. Now we just want something to be there. But at this point, we're not really talking about a God anymore. We're dealing with a box of question marks, vague speculation with no clear attributes, no testable claims, and no coherent definition. And that's where I draw a hard line. An undefined God has no attributes. No attributes means nothing to consider, nothing to test, nothing to weigh, therefore nothing to discuss. It becomes immune to critique not because it's strong, but because it's empty. And that's not clever. That's evasive. It's a placeholder for ignorance dressed up as a possibility. If you can't describe it, then it's not a concept. It's fog. So even if, hypothetically of course, something were to emerge that turns out to be responsible for our existence, something that meets the definitional threshold of creator, we'd still have to ask, is this a God? And that answer would be no, unless it also meets the burdens of the gods already on record, the ones that are supposed to be good, powerful, wise, involved, moral, caring, and worthy of devotion. But here's the thing. None of those definitions survive scrutiny. None of them align with what we know about the world. The idea of a being that is all good and all powerful in a world riddled with senseless suffering isn't just improbable, it's incoherent. The idea of all itself is an illusion. It's a projection of human desire for perfection, not a reflection of anything we actually observe in nature or experience. So if we say a God might exist, we have to ask, a God in what sense? Do we mean the God of Genesis who walked in gardens and drowned the world in a tantrum? That God falls apart under historical and moral analysis. Do we mean a God who communicates with prophets or written books? Then that God is competing in the arena of evidence and losing. Do we mean a vague force that calls the universe? That's not a God. It's a question we haven't answered yet. And here's the part that doesn't get said enough. The idea of God is not just untestable. It's traceable. We can trace it. We know exactly where it came from. Not from the heavens, but from human minds, from ancient people trying to make sense of the sun, the seasons, and the suffering. The earliest gods were explanations before we had science. They were tools for power, for social cohesion, for fear management. They were placeholders. And the evidence for that is overwhelming. So when someone trots out an abstract God, one without a name, a personality, or a people, they're not defending the concept as it actually evolved. They're offering an intellectual decoy, a reconstruction that ignores history, ignores anthropology, and ignores the very real fact that gods were never born in philosophy departments. They were born around campfires, in temples, in fear, in empire. And we owe it to ourselves to say that out loud, not just to disbelieve, but to disengage from the illusion that the God idea deserves our constant redefinition and reinterpretation. It doesn't. At some point, you stop debating whether unicorns exist in case they live at the bottom of the ocean. You accept that they're myths and you move on. The same should be true for God, not because we've ruled out every possibility in the universe, but because every actual version of God we've ever known has already failed. And what remains isn't clarity, it's residue. So no, I don't believe in God. And more than that, I firmly say there is no God, not because I think I know everything, but because I'm done pretending that the leftovers of ancient speculation are still worth the plate they're served on. Now, this conversation wouldn't be complete if I did not address this elephant in the room. Many of you are watching this video right now saying, Darante, I hear you, but if that's true, why does God feel so real? Because we've made God feel real. The same way we've made Google feel omnipresent. The same way we've made government feel omnipotent. The same way we assign agency, identity, and will to entire nations, corporations, and institutions. It's all the same kind of illusion. None of them are real, but we make them real. They are projections of our collective work, our collective identity, our collective fears and hopes pinned onto a symbol, a word, a flag, or a name. God feels real because of people, because of rituals, because of buildings, because of music, stories, grief, tradition, family, and fear. Because we carry the weight of our own existence and place it somewhere we think it can hold it for us. It's one of my favorite refrains. It's the people, stupid. That's what gives the God idea its emotional gravity. Not its substance, but its community scaffolding. It doesn't feel real because it's true. It feels real because we made it real. And we've spent millennia reinforcing it with song and suffering and sermons and silence. So if you've ever felt the presence of God, what you felt was connection. What you felt was fear. What you felt was longing. What you felt was human. And what a tragedy it would be to misinterpret our own humanity as the fingerprint of something else. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope there was something in this conversation that gave you some type of strength, gave you some type of peace, or maybe even gave you some type of motivation. If you're going to be in the Nashville area, I look forward to hanging out with you this weekend at the Nashville Nuns Convention. If you're in Southern California, I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in October because we're building local community in that area. So if you haven't already, make sure you go to the link in the description and tap in. Also, regardless of where you are, I'm looking to connect with you. So if you want to build community, also hit that link and tap in. Well, listen, that's all I have for you today. Check out some of the other videos on the screen. And until next time, keep rising.